Hi, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I'm so excited about this week's Quarantour. Our Quarantour today is with Mark Remy, who founded dumbRunner.com. He's a satirist, and his work has appeared in The New Yorker, McSweeney's.net, Men's Health, and more. Thank you for joining us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Quarantour. I am so excited about it. We are kicking off our word month this month with Mark Remy. Mark is a writer and a satirist, and his work has appeared on NewYorker.com, McSweeney's, Bloomberg Media, Outside, Men's Health, TV Guide. I don't know how to pronounce this next one, Mark. NatuRx. Is that right?
I had the same question for the editor. It's a relatively new magazine. I think they say NatuRx.
NatuRx.
I can't remember, to be honest. It's a cannabis publication.
Okay, NatuRx, Lonely, thank you for that. Lonely Planet, Mental Floss, Cosmopolitan, and Time. He's a longtime runner, and I cannot believe this next fact. He's run 28 marathons, which is crazy pants to me. Mark was an editor at Runner's World for many years and has written 4 books about running. In 2015, he founded my favorite website, dumbRunner.com, which is reader-supported, and it is very funny, and some people call it The Onion, but for runners. And he lives in Portland with his gorgeous family. Hi, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So where are you right now in your house in Portland?
I'm in my office in our house in Portland, and we're lucky enough to have 3 bedrooms upstairs, one for my wife and myself, and one each for our 2 kids, and also 2 nice-sized offices on the first floor for my wife and for me. We both work from home, so.
Yeah, that is lucky. And how is Portland weather today?
It's funny you should ask. It's you're gonna laugh, but you'll think this is a joke, and it's not. It's raining. And then you'll think, like, of course it's raining, it's Portland. But one thing we didn't know before we moved here was that Portland it's certainly very rainy for most of the year. In the summer, it's dry as a bone.
Oh wow!
And it doesn't get like East Coast or Midwest hot. Certainly not hot and humid, which is nice. But it does get relatively hot, and you will go for like 3 months sometimes with I'm not exaggerating, not a drop of rain.
Oh wow! I had no idea. It's brutal.
It's relatively brutal for me. So we went to bed last night to reports that there might be rain overnight, and we thought, that'd be exciting. We woke up and it was actually raining a little, and everything was wet. And I was just my mood just completely changed. I've been so giddy all day. It's really nice.
I love that giddy for rain. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Giddy because it's raining, not depressed because it's raining. I love that.
Oh, just the opposite. Yeah. And as I told my running buddy this morning, I went for a run this morning. I told him that I'd become one of those old people who say things like, "Oh, we sure could use the rain,"
Yeah.
It's true, we could use it, and we have it, so it's good.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned before to you, we usually start these conversations with how did you come to the book arts? But because you're a writer, I think I want to start with how did you become where you are in your world today? How did you develop your writing? And maybe we should start with tell us about your life. A little bit. Maybe we should start with how did you grow up in your childhood? Because I know you have some really interesting things to say about that. So maybe that's what led you to writing. Have you been a writer all your life?
Yes, certainly all my adult life. I hesitate only because when you said all my life, I thought back to my childhood when I was really young. I wanted to be a cartoonist. Funny enough. I spent a lot of time drawing and doodling and not paying attention to, So,
Not paying attention in class, but making everybody around you laugh because you made funny New Yorker cartoons type things.
Well, not exactly that, but yeah, something along those lines. I think the shift to the writing versus drawing happened probably in high school, high school newspaper. And by the way, the last I heard, my own high school newspaper was no longer printing an actual newspaper, which made me profoundly sad.
Oh,
That's such a loss on so many levels. But anyway, Yeah, and for my high school paper, I was the cartoonist and the humor columnist all in one.
Right. I can
And
see that. That's
looking
great.
back now, of course, I cringe at both the things that anything I did in high school. But yeah, I kind of gradually just got more into writing. And when it came time to choose a college major, journalism seemed like a logical choice. So I chose journalism. And kind of, from there it was just a series of, you know, dumb luck and stumbling into things and backing into things and serendipity and,
Yeah, all those things.
hard work as well. But I'm a big believer in the power of luck.
Yeah. Yeah. And taking advantage of luck too.
It's funny you say that because like I over the years, my advice to any, younger folks who would come to me looking for advice, like how do I get into journalism or into writing, or I want to write for magazines or whatever variation on that question. It gradually dawned on me after answering that question so many times, that my own framing kind of morphed into what you just said. Like it's not enough to have opportunities. You have to have what do we want to call it, the guts or the foolishness or whatever to like just take leaps of faith and actually act on them, because if you don't, then what's the point, right? So I go a step back and tell them step one is being aware of opportunities and know that progression isn't always linear. Okay. And if you want to get to point B and you're at if you want to get to point Z, let's call it, and you're at point A, sometimes, point B is sideways or behind you or up or down or somewhere you wouldn't expect to go. And ultimately, you might wind up at Z, or you might wind up at K or M or, V or something that's maybe even better than Z, and you never knew it. So you just have to be flexible and kind of go with it and take advantage of opportunities, even if they don't look like great opportunities at first blush.
Right. And even if they don't look like what you had planned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love that. Progression isn't always linear. I think that's my favorite phrase of the day. Thank you for giving that to me.
Of course. And by the way, I know this is not about running, and I promise not to talk too much about running to anyone.
That's okay.
I get it, but it's the same holds true of running as well. And in fact, I find lots of parallels between running and writing and everything. And
we'll talk about that a little bit later too, because that works in so many levels as well. So I am of course a runner, and I'm like all about that, chatting it up in parallels. So why don't we go through your slideshow? So
I was planning, just for everyone else listening, we had some technical difficulties with me sharing my screen. And Jamie had told me that I could send it to Ken and he would do the presenting and I would just tell him when to click it. And I thought, what a great opportunity to use, instead of just saying next, I figured I would say it in German, which will sound more dramatic. Now look it up. And everything sounds better in German, right? And it's
my God. Do you speak fluent German, or you just know some words?
Oh, I speak no German. No, I just looked up the word I wanted because I thought it's not every day you get the chance to shout in German at total strangers, right? So Ken, instead of saying next for next slide, I'm going to say nächster, which is German for next. I found. Yeah.
I don't know why I love that so much, but it's
I don't know
just
why,
terrifyingly funny.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So. A little slide presentation about me. It's not terribly long. So Ken, nächster. Right. I was born in Circleville, Ohio, a small town in the south central part of the state. Nächster.
Is that a pumpkin?
It's a pumpkin. The water tower looks like a pumpkin.
Oh my gosh.
That's all you need to know about that's all you need to know about my hometown, right?
Was it very small?
It is, let's put it this way. It is, oh boy, what is the population? Maybe 12,000 or 20,000, somewhere in that ballpark. Okay. But so it's the county seat of our county. So it's big for the county where I grew up, but it's a pretty small town.
Right.
Yeah. And in fact, I wrote a story. I don't know if you ever saw my story that I did for Runner's World about going back to Circleville 20 years later. And running on some of the roads and stuff, and like trying to like deal with things from my my childhood.
From the memories there.
Yes.
I think I remember that article actually, and if there's a way for us to drop it into the chat, if we can do that in a little bit, I'll look it up while you're later. Okay, so
Water tower looks like a pumpkin. Nice stop.
Oh, and then so many
yeah.
years later.
Then I grew up, went to college, had a bunch of jobs, and now I am in Portland. Nice stop. Portland, Oregon. Beautiful Portland, Oregon. That's a little current events humor there.
Yeah.
Why don't we skip to the slide 7, Ken?
No, we want to see the naked
Oh,
bikes.
the naked bike, right?
Okay, that's okay. So this is Portland.
That's Portland. That's a better picture of Portland. Yeah.
And is this from your deck outside your?
That is not from our deck. No, that is from that's a shot taken from the West Hills, which is higher, obviously, than the actual town, looking east at Mount Hood, which is gorgeous. You can get nice views of Mount Hood from various parts around the city, which is always delightful.
And so put us in place of where you are right now in this picture. Are you off closer to Mount Hood? Yeah, where's your house?
Oh gosh, no. So Mount Hood is about an hour and a half drive, mostly highway driving to the east, to give you a sense of scale. No, so what you're looking at in the foreground is downtown Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what you see beyond that is basically just a patchwork of neighborhoods and things close in. What you cannot see is the Willamette River, which runs roughly north to south and kind of divides East Portland and West Portland. So we live about 2 miles east of the river.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I know people don't know this on the Zoom, but I know you had gone down 1 or 2 nights for the protests, and they're downtown in just a central area, like in a few blocks within that's sort of this bubble.
Yeah,
I guess of protesting.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy you brought it up because I never miss a chance to assure people because there was so much misinformation about this out there that the protests, some crazy stuff did happen. Obviously, it's still happening here and there, but much less. It was so isolated.
Yeah.
I mean, the view that everyone else in the nation, in the world, frankly, got from social media and the news and everything else was this pinhole kind of view.
Yeah.
And it literally was like maybe a 4 or 6 block total, like 4 or 6 blocks in total area. And frankly, most of what was happening was an even tighter, like 2 block area within that area.
Right.
And beyond it, it's, well, you can imagine, look at the picture. It was beyond it. It was just more or less, normal daily life, or what passes for normal these days. So, yeah, it was interesting though. Yeah, I got a little taste of tear gas for the first time ever, so that was interesting.
Oh my goodness. So as a former journalist / current lapsed journalist, I don't know what to call you as far as the journalist title.
I'm a journalist by training, for what it's worth, but I don't really describe myself as one today, but yeah. Right,
journalist by training. Does this idea of that pinhole view of Portland and what was happening, and also I have to mention Chicago and what happens here in Chicago, of course, because and Chicago is of course bigger than Portland, but people call and say things are happening, are you guys okay? And we live far away from where things are happening, and so as a journalist by training, how does this affect your how do I frame this question? I don't know what I'm trying to ask. Like, what do you think of how the reportage is, and how do you adapt and change that in your own circles and with your own writing to combat that pinhole view?
Yeah, do you mean where Portland's concerned, or
where Portland's
at large?
Concerned. Oh, that's like a double question there, sir.
That's what I thought you were getting at, because it really, I consider myself pretty media savvy and everything else, pretty astute with that stuff is concerned. But I have to admit, this was an eye-opener even for me to see this disconnect between what I was seeing with my own eyes, living here and being at the protests and everything else. This disconnect between that, which I knew was reality because it's here in front of me. I mean, I live it, and what so many other people thought was reality here, and it was almost comical
Yeah.
I mean, as a, not to get ahead of myself, but as a satirist and a parodist myself, it's, people have mentioned correctly that it's got to be hard these days to be a satirist, because sometimes it seems like reality is satire. Like, how do you satirize something this absurd? But
Right.
people were literally lecturing me about what was happening in Portland,
Right.
from Colorado, from all over, from like all sorts of places, that it was like, have you ever been to Portland, much less recently? Do you even know?
Right. Do
It
you
was
even
just,
know?
it's bananas. It's surreal. It's surreal is what it is. Yeah, it's strange. It's
Yeah.
strange.
So how do
Anyway,
you,
so
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so even for me, experiencing, like, living that kind of disconnect was stunning. Like, I always knew that kind of thing happened. I know that what you see when you see, particularly with cable TV news, which I'm not a fan of remotely on any end of the spectrum. I just think it's a not very healthy way to get information.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a cable news watcher habitually, and you see on endless loops this footage of, this, and I get why they share it. It's dramatic. There's smoke, there's tear gas, there's clashing, and this and that.
Right.
It's like, it gives you such a skewed, distorted, warped view.
Right.
Without that context. So it's really, it's made me even more of, I don't know, I guess skeptic, I guess. So it's a healthy skeptic of
Yeah.
images that I
As
see
far as,
from elsewhere, including Chicago or whatever. Like, well, yeah, these awful things are happening, but take 10 steps back, and what's the wider context, and where is it happening, and why, and all these things. And that's the kind of
right.
nuance that gets, like, tossed out the window when you're getting
Yeah.
news from
So
cable
I
TV,
want to
social media.
revisit this.
Anyway.
I want to continue this part of the conversation, but do you have any more slides? Are we going to the, what's the German?
Nächster!
Nächster. Oh,
No,
okay, good.
that's to sound more urgent. Well, listen, so that was the end of that silly part that I did. Of course, that I condensed my whole life in a
Right,
couple
in
of
20
slides.
seconds.
And I'm happy to talk about anything you want to talk about.
And we'll continue this conversation about journalism in this weird time, but also how you reconcile that skeptic piece coming from a world of journalism and truth and honor. How do you reconcile that with, you kind of already touched on that with yourself, that you have this skepticism now when you're looking at news. Do you pull in a bunch of different sources for yourself, or do you have trusted sources of news that you go to, trusted friends that are still in journalistic news organizations that you talk to? And then how do you encourage other people to have that skepticism?
Oh man, that's a big question.
I know, I'm sorry, you expected
no,
like
it's
fun.
it's a good it's a good big question. In fact, a friend of mine, a Facebook friend of mine, sent me a private message a few weeks back with a version of that very question, saying, like, she's trying to make a good faith effort to suss out the legitimate news from the garbage and truth from falsity and all this other stuff. And she was just feeling overwhelmed, and she wanted my advice. And I, instead of pointing her to, like, certain sources, like this news outlet or this radio program or whatever, I just kind of did a brain dump with her over this kind of process that I realized as I was typing to her that I had sort of internalized over the years, which is that the best thing you can hope to do, I think, is just cultivate, well, first of all, try to cultivate this healthy sense of skepticism. And don't give in. I see this over and over, and it's really frustrating and dangerous, I think, by the way. Don't give in to this idea that you can't trust anything, like both sides are dishonest. Well, the left does it, the right does it. I don't trust anything I hear anymore. Because, like, which is like, I don't want to go down, like, a political U.S.-Russia kind of misinformation rabbit hole. But honestly, isn't that exactly the playbook that we've been hearing about, that Putin and all these other bad actors are trying to foster in the public? They don't want to. They're not even pushing a certain agenda per se. They're just trying to sow distrust and uncertainty, and cause people to not trust anything anymore. So no one knows what to believe. And that's the most dangerous thing of all. So just, you know, pay attention. If something, you know, here's my rule of thumb. If you see something on social media, and for better or worse, a lot of people are getting news from social media these days. If you see something that causes an immediate emotional reaction in you, whether it's anger or outrage, or even positive ones like Schadenfreude, or you know,
Right,
like
right,
you know, or
right.
back to German, you know,
Yeah.
or anything like that. A really strong, visceral, immediate emotional reaction for me is a red flag. I'm like, okay, well, like, oh my God, this is great. It fits exactly what I think. I want to share with everybody and say, see, like, I
Yeah.
have to break on that. Like, well, you know, I mean, what are other news outlets saying? You know, and how reputable are those news outlets?
Right,
And
right.
did I actually click the link and read the story? Because often, like so often, people don't. I know they don't. You know, yeah, it's all about just cultivating this list of sources that you trust,
Yeah.
and that fit those criteria. You know, they seem to have a good reputation among other journalists.
Yeah.
They don't report stuff prematurely. If they make a mistake, they own up to it and correct it and apologize for it, and so on and so on. It's easier said than done, and I'm kind of like stumbling trying to articulate it now off the top of my head. But
no, I love
yeah.
I love that list, and it would be great to put that out to the world. Hint, hint. Mark Remy, write something about that idea of that. I think you already did on Facebook, but maybe.
I'm sure I did. I rant about this stuff all the time. I try not to sound too ranty, you know. And by the way, the danger too is that you'll go from skeptical to jaded, and I try never to be jaded about it, you know.
Right.
It's a fine line sometimes, but you know, a healthy sense of skepticism is healthy.
It's healthy, yeah.
It's healthy, yeah.
So, I really want to talk about this more, but I also want to get to some of the questions that I had about your work and your process and all of that. And one question that I wrote down earlier was, and this, you have already answered it, but are you funny all the time?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. That's a yes, no question. Thank you, sir.
I don't think that's a question. No, I don't think that's a good question for me. I think that's a question for my wife and my kids.
Do your kids think you're funny?
All kidding aside, I'm sorry?
Your kids think you're funny?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
If I can get a laugh out of my 10-year-old daughter, that's a real victory.
That's a win for the day.
That's a win for me. What's more gratifying, actually, more gratifying than getting a laugh out of her, is hearing her come up with a zinger, especially a good pun or a reference to a Simpsons episode or something. And like we share a moment, I'm like, that's my girl. That's good.
That's your goal in life, is to make your children.
That's my goal in life. Yeah.
Have a good sense of humor. I love that. Yeah.
But to kind of briefly answer your question in a sort of serious way, I would say that humor is kind of my default setting.
Okay.
Which sometimes can get old, even for me, to be honest. The whole thing about, laughing so you don't cry, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And humor has always been a way for me to sort of process things and cope.
Yeah.
And,
maybe deflect a little bit.
I'm sorry?
And maybe deflect a little bit.
Deflect, yeah, exactly. Or if I'm being honest with myself, maybe sometimes even to hide or protect myself, or defend myself somehow in a bubble of
in a bubble of humor, and kind of definitely protection for sure,
I guess.
Yeah. And so that also leads to a piece of, like, you had mentioned earlier that you did doodles and you did the comic book thing, or the comics and that sort of thing. Oh, we got another person coming in here. Hold on. Sure. So did you feel like when you chose journalism that it would lead you to this place, or was that sort of your progression isn't always linear? How did you come to satire from that strict journalism thing? Because I remember your articles from Runner's World, most of the time they were funny. And there were, of course, we can get into wordplay in a little bit too, because of the puns and something that you had written on Dumb Runner newsletter a few years ago that still always sticks with me. But how did you come from that journalistic place to being just strictly satire right now? Or not strictly, but that's your primary thing. How did that transition move for you?
Oh boy. The short answer is gradually.
It was a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I think it had a lot to do with what I said earlier about serendipity and, stumbling into things. And it's strange, so actually going back to college, you ever look back and have these like crossroads kind of moments, or like rather fork in the road kind of moments?
Yeah.
And you realize like you totally took the wrong fork. but in hindsight, you're like, what was I thinking? But it worked out somehow anyway.
Right.
So in journalism school, we had a certain set of basic kind of prerequisites, kind of like the fundamentals of journalism, no matter what branch you wanted to go out into. Everyone took the same sort of core classes. And after a year or so of that, you chose a, like an area of specialization, like magazines or, newspapers or advertising and PR or all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I remember like it was yesterday, going to my advisor and saying like, I don't know what sequence to choose. And I said, what one offers you the most opportunities to be creative? And she said, probably either magazines or advertising. Okay. So I chose advertising.
Oh my gosh.
Which, as anyone who knows me, like today, it's like, what were you high? And
right.
I wasn't, I promise. It was just almost like, flipping a coin. So I spent, I won't say I wasted, I spent a good few years trying to convince myself that I was going to be an advertising copywriter. I had like a portfolio, I applied for jobs and internships, and it just didn't go anywhere, thank goodness, because I think I would have been miserable. But
and then how did you end up at, I'm getting off the satire question a little bit, but how did you end up at Runner's World?
Well, it'll probably wind up there anyhow, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I was just curious how you ended up moving into magazines then from that, from that advertising piece.
Right. It's not linear.
It's not linear.
Like anything else in my life. So the short version is that I graduated, floundered for a couple of years and just random jobs, went back to school looking for some sort of direction. I was going to become certified to be an English teacher. And while I was doing that, I got a part-time job at the local newspaper as a copy editor, and found I was really good at it and really enjoyed it. And, writing headlines and editing copy and everything else. And it was great. So partly because I wound up liking that job so much, and probably because I got disillusioned with the idea of being a teacher, another kind of like, what was I thinking kind of moment. I started applying for copy editing jobs at newspapers around the country. This was back when newspapers were a thing and they actually had copy editors. I was on the tail end of that, So I just got in under the wire with copy edit wise. So I got a job. I sent out like 5 resumes and got a call back from one newspaper in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is right on the border with Jersey. And it was for a little newspaper copy desk. So I landed that job, and that job coincidentally was just a 20-minute drive or so from Emmaus, Pennsylvania, which was home of Rodale Press.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, RIP, it no longer exists as Rodale Press, but and so Rodale Press, for anyone who doesn't know, was the owner, family-owned independent publisher of Men's Health and Bicycling and Runner's World and Prevention Magazine and all these healthy crunchy granola kind of publications. And I had daydreamed about working at Rodale Press since high school.
Oh wow!
In fact, I still have someplace a nice card I got in the mail from their HR department thanking me for my resume, and they would keep it on file. Like back when I was like, this was like even before college. So after about a year at that newspaper, I saw an ad for a job at Rodale and applied and got my foot in at Rodale. And that's how I got my first job at Rodale Press. And that eventually, of course, led to Runner's World and Men's Health and some other things.
I love that story. And then how did that move to satire?
Right. So after about 5 years or so at Rodale, I got a job, a magazine job in New York City from another former Rodale guy. So I was in New York City for 6 years. And then when I moved back to, I got a job again at Rodale after about 6 years in New York. I moved back to Runner's World, where I was in charge of the website, and I decided to start a blog. We were big into blogs back there, so I did a blog of my own. I don't know what it was called at first. It wound up being called Remy's World, which was essentially my first kind of like satirical thing with running. That's kind of like, so long answer to your question, like that's kind of where the satirical stuff started, when I did this, you know, I kind of gave myself this sandbox to play in on runnersworld.com. And
that's where it had started.
Yeah, because, you know,
gosh.
so first of all, we had, maybe like a dozen different blogs, and it was everything. It was Runner's World, so it was a predictable stuff, nutrition and gear and training, and it was all so earnest and expert advice, and, you know, 30 grams of carbs and interval training and all this kind of, it's like, oh man. So I think maybe unconsciously I just decided I got to leaven this with some sort of not
joy.
Humor,
yeah, you gotta have some joy in there too.
Yeah, like this stuff was way too serious. So it was kind of like filling a void, I guess. And it was easy for me because my whole life, like I said, my humor has been my default, and that's just kind of where I went with it, and it took off from there. So I did that column for like 7.5 years at Runner's World.
Wow. Yeah. And then what happened?
And then gradually, so Runner's World, well, Rodale, the parent company, got sold eventually to Hearst, which is their current owner, and the usual like crazy changes happened. And around that time, I'd been feeling a bit burnt out on Runner's World anyway, so I decided not to like even try to renew my contract. I just kind of bid them goodbye. And at the same time, a bit before that, I had launched dumbRunner.com, my own website, which, as you say, I would never say this myself, but fans say I just like the onion for runners, which is high praise, you know, but it's certainly what I try to do with it. So it's a good description in that sense.
Yeah. And actually, to those people who are listening, it is a great description, and it's very, very funny, running satire, and also some other humor in there, and also occasionally you're serious on Dumb Runner too. So I just want to throw that to the people who don't know, who aren't familiar with your website. But go ahead.
Thanks for clarifying that. So, you know, that's when I kind of made the transition away from Runner's World and toward Dumb Runner, and it just that's kind of where I am today. So essentially Dumb Runner is a part-time job for me. And I do other freelance work here and there as well, but essentially I work part-time on Dumb Runner, and that's where like the vast majority of my energy goes. Yeah.
And so Dumb Runner is 100% reader supported. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then we'll get to your slides about it, because 2 questions about that. So it's completely reader supported, and what that means is that you are sponsored through just the readers. You don't have ads or pop-ups or any kind of sponsored posts on dumbRunner.com. So what led you to that decision when you actually founded the site? And how did that process work for you at that time? Right. And how's it working for you now?
Those are all good questions.
I also tend to ask layered and multiple questions at once. So just FYI.
All right. Quite all right. Don't be afraid to follow up if I miss one of them.
Of course.
So, I gave it a lot of thought, and to be perfectly honest, I'll confess that when the site first launched, my idea was that it would have some ads, maybe some Google ads or whatever. Maybe I could get in touch with some sponsors whose products that I genuinely liked and get them to underwrite some of the content. That didn't really go anywhere. And looking back now, I'm glad it didn't, because it kind of forced my hand and made me double down on the reader supported thing. So I've gone in, headfirst into the whole independent reader-supported model, which it's kind of like the NPR model, but without the corporate underwriters.
Right, and also without the tote bag.
Without the tote bag, yeah. I do sell tote bags on my Threadless shop, by the way.
Do you?
Yeah, you can get tote bags and t-shirts.
And your t-shirts and your, I think there might be a Dumb Runner mug Do you have a mug on there too?
Yeah, I use, this is a tangent, but yeah, so there's a site called Threadless.com where anyone can start up a shop to
Yeah.
sell t-shirts and whatever they want to put their designs on, mugs and tote bags and all sorts of stuff.
Masks.
They do sell masks now, yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
designed any because it seems strange to me. Like I don't know. It seems
Right.
unseemly somehow, but that's,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, so that's one source of revenue for me is the merchandise sales on Threadless from
Yeah.
readers, or just direct donations or monthly pledges.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I did it, not because it's been lucrative, because it hasn't. It's hard getting people online, especially to pay for anything, because
Yeah.
they're so conditioned to expect it for free. And of course, nothing has ever been free. You
Right.
pay one way or another in ways that you might
Right.
know about or might not know about, but
Right.
that's another discussion. So, you know, one phrase that I keep coming back to is that it comes from Bill Gaines, you know, William Gaines, the founder of Mad Magazine.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
your idols, right?
Kind of, yeah. I grew up reading
Yeah.
Mad, and still do actually. I have a copy on my desk right now. And you know, I read in an interview years ago that someone asked him why Mad didn't take ads, and one reason he gave that stuck in my brain was, I might get this slightly wrong, so it's a little paraphrasing, but he said that, you know, that Mad Magazine couldn't very well take money from Coca-Cola and then make fun of Pepsi.
Oh.
You know what I mean? And I like,
Yeah.
that's a great way of putting it. You know, this is not an original sentiment, but I'm an equal opportunity offender. You know,
Yeah.
I take shots at Nike, at Runner's World,
Yeah.
at Noon, the hydration company.
Yeah. Which
At
Noon is a great hydration system.
hashtag Noon. Yeah. Anyway,
Hashtag Noon hydration. Yeah.
so
Not our sponsor, but
I got nothing against Noon or Nike or any of those guys, but
you have to make fun of them. You have to, because that's part of what you do.
Yeah, and if I were taking money from any of those brands, I'm sure that I would be expert at rationalizing taking their money. Like, I'll still be fair. I'll still be, you know, because I lived that at Runner's World. And I'm not to point fingers at Runner's World. This is very widespread, but, you know, they review shoes, you know, adjacent to full page ads of from Nike
Brooks.
and Asics and Brooks. And like,
Right.
it's like, well, we're independent. That doesn't influence our thinking. Like, you keep telling yourself that, okay, and of course it does. How could it not?
Of course it does.
So
And do you feel like, I'm going to interrupt real quick.
Yeah,
do you feel like you would have hampered your humor in any way to have that?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
If I could go back in time and I would have gone with the ad model and we had the same discussion.
Yeah.
And you'd ask me, like, do you feel that taking ads from Nike hampers your humor? I would say, no, of course not. You know, please. I make
and then I'd be like,
editorial independence, and it would have been. I don't want to use a profanity. It would have been.
You can use a profanity.
It would have been horseshit.
It would have been bullshit.
You know.
Yeah.
But you know, that's just the way things work. And if that's the road someone chooses, then, you know, God bless. The one that I chose was I don't know. I sleep better at night, for one thing. And I am supremely confident that if I ever have an idea to poke fun at something or skewer or satirize something, that it won't be even remotely hampered by any of those considerations, because they don't even enter the door, you know. So if I publish something, it's because I think it'll make readers laugh.
Right.
Period.
Down and dirty.
Period. That's it. That's my one and only consideration. And that's a wonderful feeling.
And we adore that. We adore that. Those of us who subscribe and sponsor all adore that fact about you, because it just keeps it pure and it's funny. It is deeply, deeply funny. And so,
by the way, you know, just aesthetically, like, who likes to see ads and pop-ups, right?
Right.
So the experience is better too, right?
The experience of it is better. The website is clean. You're right. We don't want to see those ads. So, so really quickly, I just want to mention one thing and like I said, it happened a few years ago, and I don't remember what the actual article was, but it was something about running and snakes. And somebody ran into some snakes or something. And then in the next one, there was an editor's note that was a clarification of the story. And you said, do you remember this at all? You said, we apologize for the story being blah, blah, blah. We regret the terror.
The terror, yeah.
I have to say, every time I think about that, I think about the wordplay that you have there, because of course the typical journalistic apology is we regret the error, and then just having that little pun in there and that bit. I swear to God, when I read that newsletter that Friday, I laughed and laughed, and then the whole day I just kept laughing just because of that one sentence. So that's my
that's
aside.
delightful to hear that.
What's that?
That delights me to hear that. That really makes my day. Things like
so
that.
Occasionally I'll be thinking, and of course I love puns. Puns are my favorite. The dumber, the better. And wordplay is the best thing in the world because it's just so clever and lovely. And so sometimes I'll think of that. That'll pop into my head when I'm reading whatever apology on a news site or whatever. We regret the error. It just pops into my head and it makes me laugh. So that's another vote for
my job
appreciation of your job as a satirist. So
laughter is good.
Yeah, laughter is good. So I have a couple questions on here, but we have 45 minutes left, and of course people can leave and jump in with their own questions. But one question that I had, and then we'll get into your process, because these questions are kind of all about process.
Yep.
How do you balance fatherhood and your career? How do you balance being a dad and your career? Women are asked this all the time, and I don't know that men are asked this necessarily, but since you work from home and your kids are currently during pandemic time at home, how do you balance that?
First of all, can I say kudos for even asking the question, because when the words were out of your mouth, my first thought was like, thank you for asking a man that question, because you see it with women all the time and never with men, which is horseshit, right? So it's easier for me because, as I said, I didn't set out to be like a part-time worker, but that's just kind of where things landed organically in our household. My wife works from home as well, like I said, more or less full-time. She's a marketing consultant for a small company based in Jersey, believe it or not.
Wow.
So she's much busier than I am with actual work. And she also makes more money than I do, hour for hour, like by orders of magnitude. So it was kind of a no-brainer where the the child rearing and household duties would fall. So like she does her thing, and I do laundry almost every day, and as much cooking and cleaning as I can. And I try to spend time with the kids. It's hard. One thing about working from home, and a lot of people now with the pandemic are sort of like, they kind of learned this the hard way, by trial by fire.
Right.
It's something that I've known all along.
You two, you and Sarah have been doing this a long time, so you had it down before pandemic. But like you said, pandemic.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt that.
No, not at all. So it's the thing about working from home is that, I've kind of realized this over a period of time, is that sometimes it feels, for me at least, not so much like I'm working from home, but I'm living at the office. You know what I mean? It's like you're never really off because there's a computer and like, I have, I just started the grill outside for dinner. I should sit down and check my Facebook page and share this link. And here's an email from a reader. Oh, I got a donation. I need to thank this person. And so like, it's, kind of 1,000 cuts, right? And by the end of the day, you realize like, oh my God, I've barely spent any time with the kids today, and they're watching TV and I feel terrible. So I don't have,
you don't have an answer.
I don't have an answer except to say that I feel like a screw up almost every day. Like I'm not quite getting the balance right. I should be doing it better. And I just don't. It's hard.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard. I need to be more disciplined about just like having blackout periods, I think, from
work,
limiting my own screen time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And being there for the kids. So it's interesting.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to your slideshow.
So I just added this on the end in case anyone's interested in the process of how I come up with
Yeah,
satirical
absolutely. I'm
posts
so excited.
Yeah, for Dumb Runner. Yeah, this is ripped from the headlines. This was just, I think, yesterday I saw, or a couple days ago, I saw this link. So I get Google News alerts for words like jogging and jogger and running and runner and that marathon and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And most of it is stuff I really can't use. And occasionally you find a nugget, you know, it's like panning for gold. So this is a pretty typical example. That's happening in real time, by the way, because I haven't, as I mentioned to you earlier, Jamie, I haven't yet written or published this post, but this is the genesis of it.
So I get a preview.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, pretty exciting, right?
Yeah.
Your luck. So step one is I'll see a normal news item, such as this one, about a jogger in Alaska who survived a bear attack because of some bear spray, which is a kind of harrowing story, but
yeah,
news could have been worse, I guess. So step nästa. Step two is I think about it, right? I think I do. It's a cliche. It's terrible, but I do think a lot in the shower. I think while I'm walking the dog. I think when I'm going to sleep at night. Actually, in the early mornings when I first wake up, you have that kind of like moment of. I wrote about this in a recent newsletter. There's like at least for me, a moment of kind of total peace and quiet. So I can hear birds chirping. I just kind of lie there with my eyes closed, and before my brain really kicks in,
yeah,
like being able to see deep down into a still lake. I can see like, oh, okay, all right. So that's, and sometimes like ideas come percolating up then. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. They're coming up from the bottom of a lake.
Something like that, yeah. So, and then of course, once you're out of bed, the waters are muddied and everything's crazy.
Right.
The kids are yelling and fighting. So step two basically is thinking about it, and that can last for minutes or days or even weeks. Sometimes I'll jot down an idea and just let it kind of marinate. Nästa. So then the light bulb moment comes. I never know when or how it's going to come, but sometimes it just pops in your head. So I thought for this story, what if in a story like this, a bear turned the tables and showed up with his own self-defense spray? Like,
oh my God,
against
the runner.
Yeah, and then I thought, well, what if what would that look like? Would he have bear spray himself? Would he have human spray? Would he? Would it be even better if he got in a tussle with the runner and somehow got a hold of the runner's bear spray? I'm like, aha, the tables have turned. Now what? And then okay, next. And then sometimes, very often actually, for me, I think of a better idea. So in this case, I think I was walking the dog when it hit me. Like, now, what if the trail runner had a gun? Like he was one of these guys who runs with a gun for protection.
Right.
And there was a struggle, and struggle and tussle, and the bear went for the gun and got the gun. And like, oh, now the drama is upped even more, right? So that would be even funnier, I think, because not least because like a photoshopped picture of a bear holding a pistol is like automatically funny. At least to me it is,
Right.
Right. So next comes the photo search, and people I think would be amazed how much time I spend in a typical day just browsing through stock photo sites. I'm not exaggerating when I say I can scroll through thousands of pictures. Just to find the right one for a single post. It can make so much of a difference. So in this case, though, I searched for bear standing up, and next, please. And
oh my gosh,
a lot of photos. And next, please. 9,000 results, except
this
that
little
one.
guy.
And so sometimes, so even better sometimes gets even better. So in this case, I saw this photo and I ditched my even better idea and came up with what I think is more or less the final headline and photo, which is next, final slide.
Throw out the old idea.
There we go.
Oh my gosh, insecure bear wants to maul trail runner.
Because isn't that picture great?
It is his
picture
expression.
like he's just not sure. Like, will everyone laugh at him? Like he's never mauled someone before.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, that's
Anyway,
really, really interesting to go through that process, because it's like it's completely different than the bear spray. I love that.
oh yeah, and it's kind of a delightful surprise for me to, like, you know, when something kind of like creeps up on me out of the blue. It's kind of fun.
Right. He's
Um,
so funny. Oh my gosh, that's
I mean,
great.
how can you not use that picture, right? Like sometimes you see a picture and think, I have to use that picture. Now I just need a headline for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
So of
love
course
it.
so now I need to go through and actually write the short post to go along with it, which will read like a news account or something like that with maybe like some quotes from the bear or whatever. But
Quotes from the bear.
but honestly, and actually this kind of circles back to what you said about being reader supported. So when I publish this ultimately and share a link to it on Twitter and Facebook and what have you, you know, people will see what you're seeing now, which is the headline and the picture. And
Yeah.
I hope they'll get a laugh out of it before they move along. And because I don't depend on page views,
Yeah.
i.e. on advertising, you know, for advertising revenue,
Yeah.
if someone sees us on Twitter and laughs and doesn't click the link, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy with that. Sincerely, I am. Whereas any other site with ads, they would be tearing their hair out. Like, click the link, because if you don't click the link, they don't care.
We don't make any money. Yeah.
You gotta click, otherwise they don't make money, right? And
Oh, I
I
love
don't
it.
have to worry about that. So, you know, if you laugh, I'm happy.
If you laugh, I'm happy.
If you laugh, I'm
That
happy.
seems like that's your whole life motto. If you laugh,
Something like
I'm
that, yeah.
happy. That's great. Two more questions really, really quickly. During this weird time, how has your writing changed? And then the second question is, describe your average pandemic day. But you kind of walked through that with the laundry and the kids and the grill and the Facebook and all the things. So
Right.
pandemic day isn't different for you than normal day. So
Not much different. Not much different. Yeah.
Right. So
it's pretty much
yeah.
the same.
So has your writing changed during pandemic time?
It has, in the sense that I think when, you know, in times of stress, you know, by which I mean more than normal stress. I mean, everyone experiences stress as part of life, and that's, you know, it is what it is. But in times of unnaturally high stress or anxiety,
Heightened.
I think I lean even more heavily on humor and satire and stuff to kind of process what's going on in my own head. And I think it must influence the ideas that I have in the first place, like, because the things that I'm thinking about unconsciously and the things I'm noticing, all of that kind of informs my, you know, the ideas that I have. And I have the list of like 1,000 ideas on a sticky note someplace that I just jot down. You know, so it's, the pandemic and so on has affected my writing in the sense that it's affected my state of mind.
Oh
That makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
It
how could
totally
it not?
makes sense.
And I have,
Absolutely.
I don't know if you saw my, I don't know if you saw my like most recent post about the core workout, but it's a good
Yes,
example.
I did. I did. Yeah, it was great.
It's a good, thank you. It's a good example of what I'm talking about. It's, and for those of you who don't know, I did this like post with images of people exercising and saying, you know, you can do this 20-minute core workout anywhere, but why?
Right.
And that's a riff, of course, off of these fitness websites who share these stories all the time, like, do this 10-minute workout anywhere, and it seems like a normal article, but then you actually read the copy, and the copy is just a little, it's a little disturbing.
It's a little disturbing, and it's perfect for what it for
it's basically like, you know, you can do this exercise, and you know, don't forget to smile. Maybe that'll help you forget momentarily that we're all living in a dystopian nightmare.
Exactly.
Also, keep your back straight.
Right.
You know,
right. Here's the exercise tip.
By the way, I think that came. Yeah, and I think that came just from my own feelings of seeing, like, scrolling through Twitter, for example, and seeing these stories of just like awful things happening, and this just bad news, and I mean, from all sorts of angles, you know, and then all of a sudden seeing one of those mundane
yoga workouts, like, or whatever.
From fitness fitnessguy.org, you know, hey,
Right.
blast your abs with these 6 easy moves. And
Right.
it's just jarring. Like,
It's
how
the
can you think of
disconnect.
abs at a time like this?
Exactly. And I want to, in our last minute, I want to plug the McSweeney's.net, Glenn Ross satire piece that you did it was a couple months ago, maybe. I can't remember. Time is irrelevant right now. So people should go to McSweeney's.net and look you up for that one, because it's a reimagining of the scene, the most famous scene from Glenn Ross in Zoom. It's a Zoom conversation with that very famous steak knives scene. So I encourage people to go take a look at that. So thank you so much, Mark, for coming. I can't even tell you how incredibly inspiring and joyful this conversation was. And I know that we could talk for another 2 hours about all of these things, and we could go even deeper, but we don't have time right now. So I want to thank you for coming, and thank you for kicking off our Word Month so eloquently and lovely.
Oh, happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's Quarantour with Mark Remy. It was such a great conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please consider donating to artistbookhouse.org/donate to help us bring more programming like this one to your house. Thank you.